for joining us tonight, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you're watching, because that's a cool thing about an online show. It's available on demand whenever you're ready for some poetry. I am your host, Mitch Nobis. As always, this is Wednesday Night Sessions, based out of Farmington, Michigan, but again, online, viewable anywhere. We're excited and lucky to have a Michigan poet joining us today from the west side of the state. Yeah, kind of bring this back up later, but I think it's pretty cool. We actually have two West Michigan poets in this season. So we'll talk about that a little bit more after the reading. But joining us is Andrew Collard. Andrew, I'll throw it over to you. Take it away.
Thanks, Mitch. Thank you for having me on. It's good to be here. We're bringing, I'm afraid, some distinctively Monday morning vibes to the Wednesday night sessions, but we'll do the best we can. Here to read some poems from my book Sprawl, which came out in March of 2023. This is very much a book set on the east side of Michigan, which is to say the Detroit metropolis, which is where I'm originally from. And I might just jump right into it here. This is a poem called Perpetual Motion, which is sort of an autobiography in cars, which I think we all have. Perpetual motion. I drove, the Focus leapt. I slept inside a Civic for 4 nights at a rest stop. East of Harper, my whole existence packed into the trunk. I rode like a witness or misplaced luggage. I threw up in the cabin of a duct-taped Cavalier, Crown Vic, Astrovan, Beetle. Blame it on the road noise or the radio. Smart-ass friends who put me quick at ease. I shouted out the lyrics of the MC5 from the back seat of a stranger's Chrysler, carried through the tributaries of the night toward what? A bedroom's near total stillness, stray headlights through the blinds, solitude. When I wake to stillness, think of stillness ambushed by how tenuous a thing it is to breathe, listening as my neighbor's lamp or glass bursts against our shared wall. I think of where the crystal stillness leads and whisper, I don't want to go. I circle back, adrift in an age of endless leaving, as if home were not extraordinary. I called shotgun, bumped a cyclist, watched my sister swigging whiskey in her Cadillac as she slurred unprompted questions to the sky, the trees, the darkened houses. Ask me where the day began, and I'll tell you everywhere or nowhere how I steered an orphan friend's Kia up and down M3 from Detroit into the sticks until he quieted, then slouched from his grieving and into sleep, while beside the car the ad-ridden fixtures of the strip malls and the churches blurred into a path of light. This next one is a poem out of childhood, which is called Cicada Song, which sort of takes the drone of the cicada as a sort of form. When I was a kid, I didn't know what that sound was, and so I had this idea in my mind that it was like construction from far off. So a little bit of a I Hear America Singing vibe here. Cicada Song. Oh, the drag days, the vertigo of earth, the sap, the night, the cruelty of jays, the mantises, the years I passed in darkness to elude them, winters languishing above my head. Oh, how many lives behind me now, the carapace, the bumbling climb, the crater, the holes we leave, the city of tubers, subterranean, the sickened leaves, the helicopters. Oh, forgotten weeks my father sang above the world of men, trim branches, power cables, sandbox song descending to the empires of brick and mortar, the side yard, the hose, the child demanding gulps, the water puddling in the grass round the halo of his muddy shoe. Oh, harmony, the saw mower symphony of crickets, the percussive thudding, excavator, dump truck, traffic, whispering of the freeway, love. Oh, can you hear me? I am calling you between the branches, the primordial maple, the wellspring bark, the arm I sprang from. Oh, the fall, the sudden stop, the cushion of the world beneath me. Oh, the burrow and the boy who keeps watch from his window. Oh, those years the whole earth held me, the crusted husk, the body I discarded, the frame home I couldn't recognize, still clinging to the rotting deck, the old life crouched and pleading to remain erect, to mother me. Oh, the blanket I would draw over the houses, the ants, the daddy longlegs wobbling in the dew, the rain, the hose, the shouting children. Oh, to tuck them in, my love. Oh, can you hear me? Heavy magic of the wing, the sap, the chorus of the trees, the wild vibration echo chamber of my chest, the notes dispatched into the heat, the rushing water, siren, box fan static of the radio, the womb, my love, the space between the trees, the sky that cries, ascend, ascend, and all to find you, all to know I won't return. This next one is also a poem out of childhood, which is called Commute. This takes place during the Detroit newspaper strike of the 1990s. And it's, I think you'll catch on. This is kind of the first time I ever saw an action like that in person, anything like that. So this is sort of reaching back to childhood eyes. Commute. Shrove Tuesday, I watched them through the windshield of my mother's Astro van, kneading palms together before the plant on Metro Parkway in order to incite the necessary heat to lift morale. Such commotion I had yet to witness, except perhaps inside a church, as if a parade had broken out, but slowly lost its impulse in the dark hours of the morning, the cold air rendering each breath as an escape. I was reading X-Men then, or at least absorbing panels. I recognized the heavy coats, the shouts, the cavalcade of strangers massed in service to a conflict that I couldn't grasp. Some marched hand-stapled posters raised toward the avenue, honk if you're with us, at 7 a.m. Others gathered around the barrels rife with fire inherited from other days. We are not safe, they seemed to say. You are not safe, as though my mother's box of glass and steel built for hurtling was all that held me, those few inch-thin layers of wrought earth. And then the stoplight changed, and oof, the congregation vanished in the side view mirror, and pow, my mother scared up the city's final box of punchki, and zap, the ancient line of school buses parted. In the end, I wasn't even late for class. Leery-eyed, the picket would continue deep into tomorrow's ashes and for another year beyond, its lingering questions cast off to the courts, all distantly removed from those sub-freezing interludes, the bodies that were then so tangible. We are still here, they assured us from the roadside, from the fading stickers on our mailboxes and our parents' bumpers. I am still here, navigating signals and crumbling infrastructure, bracing for another year's impression of dire weather from someone else's Dodge. Dear neighbor, we are not safe. Honk if you're with us. Got one more for you here. This is called Autotopia. There's a series of poems in Sprawl, which all take the title Autotopia. It's a sort of a name that I use to address the sprawling metropolis of the empire of the automobile, I guess, that's sort of wrapping its tendrils around the world. This Autotopia is for the city, Detroit, Michigan. Today I descend the stairs of the old parking garage as though I'm under anesthetic, fragments of the past washing over me until I am unable to name the artifice of your piazzas, to call your smokestacks out as noise. These gaps in memory impose on my attention the way your various structures do on the sprawl of the landscape, as your children leap between them in their F-150s, Chevy vans, and discontinued Buicks, as the buses and elevated train cars offload bodies in exchange for other bodies. Even so, I remember the gas station up the avenue selling what passes for New York-style pizza, spinning behind a pane of glass, and the intersection it took a full 10 minutes to navigate on foot. How I was so sure then of my father's command over the crowded street, I never questioned, never thought in all the world we could be lost. We were going to the same place all those grim travelers out along Jefferson were going, the place they disappeared to, the traffic shooting west toward the harbor terminal with its warehouse painted a startling blue, the dock where the ferries loaded passengers bound for Boblo, and your cargo ships departed, filled with steel coils, wire, and slabs destined for auto plants. We were going where the years went as we watched entire decades dissipate up and down these streets we walked hand in hand, the same place we're still going in all the world, no day like this. Thank you.
I love the and like the breakneck pace of your work and how like the automobile takes such a central focus. It really kind of most reviewers aren't from Metro Detroit. It feels like you're driving through Metro Detroit sometimes, like with the pace of these and kind of the way like the second poem especially interweaves it, like even in the middle of all this, there's still nature, like, but cicadas are also kind of breathlessly paced. And, that was cool. It's a great set. Those all kind of jived together really well. I dug that. Thank you.
The book's kind of, thank you. It's the book itself was kind of the project is building a little city in a way, which is not meant to be obviously comprehensive in any way or something like that. But yeah, just sort of the first poem in the book is called Diorama. And so that becomes sort of the formal gesture of the book in a way, I guess.
Yeah. Very cool. Let's my first question was going to be kind of about region stuff. So let me kind of tweak it a little bit based on that. So you're originally from Metro Detroit. Now you're on the west side of Michigan. Two very kind of, for being in the same state, two very different regions in many ways.
Sure.
And I was telling before we officially started recording, Andrew and I were talking, Jane Zwart's going to be on this season as well, who's another West Michigan poet. And she and I were having kind of a similar conversation. So I'm actually going to kind of reframe a similar question that Jane got, just to kind of get another point of view on it. How does region influence your work? You know, like growing up in Metro Detroit versus now living and writing in the west side of Michigan. How kind of those two different areas inform, or do they inform your work?
They inform my work completely in the sense that because they're the places that I've lived, they're the places that have produced me, if that makes sense. And so I'm very much trying to write out of a sort of embodied, you know, my own experience of the physical world in my life. And I'm also not trying to write autobiographically necessarily in a very direct way. When my kid shows up in the book, as he often does, he's not quite my kid, you know, or the speaker, of course, is, as everybody often talks about, I guess, is not quite me. But that's really where this started. It's not like I'm setting out necessarily to write a poem about the Detroit area or my neighborhood where I live in Grand Rapids right now, but that's going to deeply inform anything that I do, just based on this sort of commitment to the material world, I guess.
Yeah. Do you find was it easier to write poems about Detroit after moving away from the Metro Detroit?
In some ways, yeah. There's definitely sort of a period of exile where there's a particular block where I lived in Madison Heights for a little while, which this is for my Michigan folks, this is the square between 12 and 11 Mile, and bordered by John R. Road and DeQuinder. So there's a whole bunch of things in that area centered around sort of the old Universal Mall, which show up in the book. And yeah, having lived there for a while, once I ended up moving to Kalamazoo for grad school and then up to Grand Rapids, and things definitely started coming back. So I think the most prominent is there's a little slider window called the Tellway, which there's a big poem about in section 3 called Tellway Lament, which is very much about that too, just sort of that process of, you know, I was kind of made here, but I don't live here anymore. And so what's that sort of complex interaction when I'm returning to a place like that?
Very cool. Yeah, no, and it's Metro Detroit is such a unique area too. I'm a transplant. I'm a farm boy. I'm originally from mid-Michigan and moved down here as a, adult already. So kind of a different frame of looking at the area. And I find it's kind of impossible to capture for folks who haven't spent considerable time in Metro Detroit, because there's like this kind of mythologized, falsified Detroit.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That's been discussed ad nauseum. And then people are like, oh, Detroit's it's like a sub 600,000 person population base now. I'm like, yeah, but Metro Detroit, like if you include like Southfield northward, it's still a million plus person. It's just like you said, like a metropolis.
I looked this up. It's 4 million in that whole Southeast Michigan area. Yeah. And that's the kind of I think a lot of folks, in Midwestern cities, kind of have a sense of that city upon city feeling. But especially out here, that's pronounced. It's like which you cross the street, you're somewhere else. It's a silly thing to say, I guess, but it literally is as far as the city border goes.
Yeah, like Metro Detroit actually did invent sprawl, like I was going to say for better or for worse. I would argue it's 90% for worse, but that is a Detroit invention. The suburbs kind of started here, and it's this kind of sprawling. I can't think of a better word. Organism that's you just kind of keep going, and you slowly realize, like, wait, I'm in a totally different place now.
Organism is a good way to put it. I think that's how I view it on a lot of levels.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to contain. It's just sort of spreads like a virus almost. Timely. Using the word virus is no longer the same either.
Yeah.
The question too is kind of a unique one. One thing we haven't highlighted yet is Sprawl was the winner of the I always get all the prize names confused, the Hollis Summers Poetry Prize.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's kind of a cool way to come about publication. In the writer world, let me backtrack for a second. For our audience members who are not writers, poetry publishing is kind of a wild and woolly unknown world. Like novelists, you find an agent, they get you a book deal. Poets kind of have to, you make your book and you make it as good as you can, and then you sort of like send it all over the place, until you get a bite. And one of the more common ways for first books to get out is to enter it in these competitions. And your book won one. So since I find that, especially for non-writers, that's kind of an unknown entity, just kind of more of a comment than a question. Tell us about that for a minute, if you would. Like, how did it feel to actually win one of those prizes? Like, what was the behind the scenes process on getting out there, et cetera?
Well, the funny thing about that is, I've sent out versions of this book over a couple of years to many different prizes. I'm not sure even what the number would be on that. So, keep plugging, first of all, because a lot of it is finding the right sort of series of editors who are, able to see your work, I think. So shout out to Sarah Green and Jennifer Kwan Dobbs for that, who are the series editors. But the funny thing about actually winning it was my phone had broken, like the screen was broken on the Sunday of the week. I started getting some kind of call that I couldn't figure out what it was, and I couldn't answer it on the Monday while I was waiting for a new phone to come, which didn't end up coming till Thursday. So I'm like looking at my internet account or whatever it is and being like, oh, what is this number? And like searching the number and like, oh, maybe I should call it back. And then I couldn't get a hold of like a phone. So I waited like 3 days, and then finally I figured out that it was Sarah was calling me from the prize. I was like, man, that was kind of a close call. It would be this exact moment, like the one time I'm out this thing in the past year. But anyway,
I love the way it builds dramatic tension, like in the movie.
I know. So you won, but can you claim the prize? Yeah. I don't know.
That's fantastic. That's so cool. Awesome. Well, hey, Andrew, thank you again for joining us today. And I look forward to getting your book. Every now and then I have guests on the show who's like, I kind of just discovered, again, another thing we were talking about before I hit record. If you enjoyed this, Andrew was also on Stateside, a Michigan Public Radio show. And we were chatting about how awesome it is when poets get that rare little bit of publicity. So it works. Like, somebody sent me the link to Andrew's interview. I'm like, let's get him on this show also. So I'm definitely going to grab a copy of Sprawl. Viewers, I recommend you do too. Many of our viewers are right here in Metro Detroit, so it sounds like it's right up our alley. Andrew, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you again for having me. It's great to meet you again in our digital realm here.
Yes, absolutely. All right, viewers, we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.